They say funerals bring out the truth in families. I say they bring out the worst. While my father was being lowered into the ground, my sister-in-law looked me straight in the eyes and accused me of forging his will. Right there, in front of everyone. What she didn't know, what no one knew, was that the handwriting wasn't mine. It was hers, and I had proof. This story isn't just about inheritance. It's about betrayal wrapped in black dresses, whispered lies during grief, and a silent revenge that would unfold one shock at a time. And trust me, the fall was loud. What would you do if someone tried to erase you from your own family? Leave your comment below, and if you think you're ready for this story, like and subscribe now. You won't believe what comes next. At my father's funeral, right between the priest's prayer and the folding of the flag, Denise leaned in, all gentle and grieving, and whispered, "You forged the will, Lorraine." I looked her in the eye, steady, cold. Not because I wasn't devastated, I was, but because I knew she was about to light a fire she couldn't control. People forget that the ones who grieve in silence usually carry the sharpest memories. And I remembered the ink, the dates, the tone in Dad's voice when he warned me a month before he died. If anything goes wrong with the papers, check the handwriting. What Denise didn't know, and what made her slip so foolish, was that I recognized her handwriting like the back of my hand. Years of passive-aggressive notes on the fridge, grocery lists she used to leave when she stayed over. The fake will, it screamed her. And Glenn, my brother, or what was left of him, had signed it. My own blood. That's the thing about family betrayal. It never starts with strangers. It crawls in with a familiar face and a soft smile. But I didn't confront her. Not yet. I knew better than to ruin my own timing. Stanley, our family lawyer, pulled me aside after the burial. "Do you still want to wait until the will's reading?" he asked, clearly anxious. He'd seen the footage, the one from my dad's office camera. Denise entering alone, shuffling papers, replacing envelopes. It was all there. "Let her read her version first," I told him. "She's about to build her own downfall, and I want a front row seat. Vengeance is better served quietly, with witnesses, especially when the room still smells like lilies and secrets." Denise, of course, didn't waste time. A few days later, she hosted a private will reading at her place. Just family, she said. The same family she had spent the last months manipulating like chess pieces. Suddenly, cousins stopped returning my calls. Aunts gave me that polite, guilty smile like they knew something they shouldn't. That's how manipulation works. It poisons slowly, and I let her. Because every time she twisted the story, more holes appeared. Wrong dates, mismatched documents, even a check supposedly signed by my dad 2 days after he passed. If you were in my shoes, would you stay silent or fight back? Let me know in the comments. And if this story's pulling you in, don't forget to like and subscribe. You don't want to miss what comes next. So there we were. Everyone seated, glasses of water on the table like we were at some polite brunch instead of a legal ambush. Denise stood, papers in hand, and started reading. Her voice was calm, controlled, too controlled. And then it came, the clause that handed everything to Glenn. The house, the land, the accounts. Lorraine is to receive nothing. Not even a line about me. That's when Stanley stood up and calmly said, "Actually, we have something else to add." He clicked play on his laptop, and the room went dead silent. There she was, on video, alone in my father's office, opening his drawer, switching out papers. The timestamp? 2 days before his stroke. No sound, just the act. Glenn turned pale. One of our cousins gasped. Denise froze. For someone who thought she'd nailed every detail, she sure forgot about the security camera. And when she ran out the back door without a word, well, it was better than any justice system could have offered. And that's when the whispers started. She always was sneaky. Remember when she tried to sell that old car of Harold's? One of my aunts even posted on Facebook, "Be careful who you trust with family papers." The fall was quick, brutal, public. She tried deleting everything, old emails, messages, even her Instagram, but screenshots live forever. And you can't erase the truth once it's out, especially not when it's tied to inheritance, fraud, and financial corruption that ran deeper than anyone had guessed. But just when I thought I had it all figured out, Stanley handed me another envelope. This came from the bank. "Your father's safety deposit box." Inside was another will. Older, yes, but signed and notarized. And a folder full of documents tracing money transfers from accounts linked to a fake company under Denise's maiden name. Offshore. Clean on the surface, but deeply dirty. That's when it hit me. Glenn wasn't just a pawn. He was the registered owner of a fraudulent trust. She'd made him the fall guy. My own brother. For weeks after the video dropped, Glenn wouldn't return my calls. Not a text. Not even a voicemail with that awkward throat clearing he always did. I wasn't surprised. People don't usually talk much when they realize they've been played, especially when the woman pulling the strings is their own wife. But I knew he wasn't the villain. He was the fool, the puppet. And maybe, just maybe, he was starting to realize how deep Denise had dragged him into this mess. But forgiveness? That wasn't on the table. Not yet. It was Aunt Sylvia who first mentioned it. You know your brother could go to jail too, right? Her voice was soft, like she didn't want the walls to hear. Apparently, some of the forged documents had his signature. Bank transfers, asset reallocation forms, even a rental agreement for Dad's lake house, listed under a company name that didn't exist. That's when I realized this wasn't just about greed. This was about financial crime. Denise wasn't playing family games. She was laundering money in Dad's name. And Glenn was the perfect decoy. I sat with Stanley in his office. Small room, cold coffee, piles of folders. He looked at me like I was about to walk into traffic. If we go after her, we go after him too. I knew that, but there was something poetic about using the very person she used against me. Against her. What if we flip him? I asked. Make him testify? That's when we started crafting the plan. And let me tell you, nothing stings like betrayal exposed under oath, with your own husband on the witness stand. We called it the quiet strike. Glenn received a letter, formal, clinical, inviting him to cooperate in the upcoming legal investigation. If he didn't respond, he'd be named in the fraud suit. If he did, he'd get immunity. I expected him to fold fast, but what I didn't expect was what came with his reply. A flash drive. No explanation. Just a sticky note. She kept everything in this folder. I didn't know until last week. I plugged it in. Emails, voice memos, a PDF titled Contingency Plan If Lorraine Talks. That's when it hit me. She had mapped it all out. My every possible move. Denise had a folder that literally tracked who I might contact, what proof I could have, and even had fake statements ready to discredit me if needed. She was prepared for war. And that kind of evil? It's not instinctive. It's calculated. Ruthless. This wasn't just about inheritance. This was conspiracy. Plain and simple. And it wasn't just me she'd planned to destroy. She had notes on 2 cousins, a neighbor, even Stanley. You ever discovered someone plotting your downfall like it was a corporate strategy? Let me know in the comments. And hey, if you're still with me, don't forget to like and subscribe. You won't believe what comes next. We handed the flash drive over to the DA's office. A week later, Denise was served. Not by mail, by 2 agents in black jackets in front of the entire Sunday church crowd. I wasn't there, but apparently she dropped her purse. Lipstick rolled under a pew. Brenda, our neighbor, told me she turned ghost white and didn't say a word. Glenn? He moved out the next day, into a small apartment above a diner. I heard he eats pancakes for dinner now. Kind of poetic, really. But here's the twist. Denise didn't break. Not in the way we thought. She denied everything, said the flash drive was planted, and called Glenn mentally unstable. Her lawyer even accused me of coercion. That's when I realized this woman would burn the whole forest if it meant she got to keep the ashes. And in court, that's dangerous, because people love a confident liar, especially one who cries on cue. So Stanley and I did something we hadn't planned. We tracked down the notary who had signed the fake will. Took us 3 states and a lot of awkward phone calls, but we found him. Retired, living with his daughter. He looked at the signature and shook his head. That's not mine. Boom. Another crack in Denise's foundation. And just like that, we were back in control. The fraud wasn't just obvious now, it was undeniable. Still, even with all the evidence, something didn't sit right. One of the accounts, the offshore one, wasn't linked to Denise or Glenn. The paperwork pointed to someone else, a name I hadn't heard in years, a name my father once warned me about. And just like that, I knew. This wasn't over. This went way deeper than Denise. And the real puppet master? They were still out there. The name on the offshore account hit me like cold water to the face. Ronald Mayfield. It took me a few seconds to even place it. Then I remembered. The man who once tried to buy out Dad's land back in the 90s. Sleazy guy. Always in a leather jacket. Always smelling like expensive failure. Dad never trusted him. called him a snake with a smile. I hadn't heard that name in over 20 years. But there it was, tied to an account Denise had been funneling money through. That's when I realized this wasn't her idea. She was following someone else's playbook. I asked Stanley to pull old property records, business filings, even newspaper clippings. What we found made my skin crawl. Mayfield had a history of shady land acquisitions, shell companies, and bribing local officials. In 3 different states. And wouldn't you know it, 2 years ago, he registered a consulting firm under a new name, right when Denise started managing Dad's medical paperwork. Coincidence? Please. The man had never disappeared. He'd just changed masks. And now he was back, reaching through Denise like a puppeteer in a silk suit. It started to make sense. Denise had never been smart enough to build all this alone. The forged documents, the offshore routes, the contingency plans. But Ronald? Oh, he was the architect. And if there was one thing worse than family betrayal, it was betrayal engineered by someone outside, someone who'd always seen your family as a target. The manipulation wasn't personal for him. It was business, strategic, cruel, and deeply rooted in the same corruption that nearly bankrupted my father once before. I told Glenn. He sat across from me in silence. No reaction at first, just slow breathing, as if realizing he'd been a pawn not just for Denise, but for a man he'd met once as a kid and forgotten. He used to give me candy, Glenn mumbled, said it was our little secret. That one line changed everything. Because now we weren't just talking about fraud, we were talking about grooming, long-term control. And suddenly, this wasn't about a will anymore. It was about undoing a decades-long manipulation that started before either of us realized. You ever discover a secret that rewrites your entire childhood? One that turns memories into warnings you missed? Let me know below, and if you're still with me, drop a like and subscribe, because this is far from over. We decided to find Ronald. Couldn't go to the police, not yet. People like him don't get caught by accident. You need precision, pressure, and proof. Stanley had a contact in Florida, retired investigator, owed him a favor. Within a week, we had a location. Private condo, under a fake name, guarded like Fort Knox. We couldn't confront him, but we could monitor. And maybe, just maybe, get him to slip. People like Ronald always slip. Their ego makes them sloppy. Meanwhile, I found Dad's old journal in a storage box. I almost didn't open it. Too raw, too much pain. But inside, between scribbled dates and half-finished sentences, was a line. If Ronald ever comes near the family again, go to folder 3B. I ran to the attic, opened the filing cabinet, and there it was. Folder 3B. Inside, not just documents, a voice recorder. And the last thing my father ever recorded, a warning. One that made everything fall into place. He knew. Dad knew about the fraud before he died. He knew Denise had teamed up with Mayfield. He even said it. They'll try to erase Lorraine from my legacy. But I left her the real gift. The truth. His voice shook. Tired, but determined. That recorder became everything. The proof. The motive. The final piece. I played it over and over, memorizing every word. And that's when I knew it was time to go public. Not with a lawsuit, not with lawyers, but with something far more dangerous. A story. We filmed everything. The story, the documents, the audio. Stanley helped me structure it like a documentary. We didn't send it to the authorities. We uploaded it. Publicly. No password. Just a quiet post. My father's death wasn't an accident. Here's the truth. Within 24 hours, it had over 800,000 views. Comments poured in. People who'd been scammed by Mayfield. Former employees. Distant relatives. Denise's name started trending. Not for the reasons she liked. And just when I thought I'd reached the bottom of the rabbit hole, a message popped up. Anonymous.
Hi.
One line.
You are on the Moving Narratives
You missed the
channel.
third will.
Subscribe.
The message
and
came
follow
from
our
a blank
stories.
profile. No photo, no history. Just a username made of numbers. You missed the third will. I read it 3 times before it sank in. How could there be another one? Dad was methodical. Old school. If there was another will, he didn't just hide it. He protected it. And the idea that we'd uncovered so much, the forgeries, the fraud, the offshores, only to find out there was still one piece missing, it made me sick to my stomach. Stanley didn't believe it at first. Legally, only 2 were ever notarized. But that's the thing about people like my father. They don't play by expected rules when they feel cornered. And he had every reason to feel that way in his final months. Between Denise's manipulation, Glenn's silence, and Ronald's shadow creeping back in, my father likely wrote something no lawyer ever saw, something handwritten, unofficial. A final act of control, or protection. I went back to the house, the original one, the old farmhouse where Dad raised us before moving to the city. It had been empty for years, just a few broken windows, dusty furniture, a couch still covered in plastic, like time had paused out of respect. I checked the desk drawers. Nothing. The closet. Still nothing. And then I noticed the floor vent near the bookshelf. Unscrewed it. Reached in. My hand hit metal. A thin box, locked and wrapped in cloth like someone had hidden something sacred. Inside, letters, dozens, mostly written to me, never sent. And at the bottom, folded like an old recipe, a will. Not notarized, but dated and signed, with my name at the top as sole heir. No conditions, no lawyers. Just a line. If the truth doesn't survive, my family won't either. My hands were shaking, because now I had proof not only of Denise's fraud, but of my father's final intent. He hadn't been confused. He hadn't been misled. He'd simply been afraid. You ever held a piece of paper that changes everything? Not just for you, but for everyone who ever doubted you. Tell me in the comments. And if this story still got you, hit that like and subscribe. You'll want to see where this goes. I sent Stanley a copy, but I didn't tell him everything. Not yet. I needed time to think. Because this third will wasn't about money anymore. It was about restoring a legacy that Denise and Ronald tried to erase. And if I went public with this, it wouldn't just burn them. It would burn Glenn too. Because he knew the farmhouse existed. He'd visited it with me a dozen times. If he'd thought to look, even once, he might have found it. But he didn't. He'd chosen not to. Denise, on the other hand, wasn't done. Word had spread about the video, and now she was spinning a new story. Lorraine broke into Harold's properties, she told local reporters. She's fabricating documents. Classic deflection. But I wasn't surprised. That's what liars do when they start running out of air. They scream louder. Problem was, people weren't buying it anymore. Not after the audio. Not after the emails. And certainly not after Glenn quietly confirmed to a journalist that the flash drive was real. Still, the weight of it all was getting to me. Not the lawsuits or the rumors. Those I expected. It was the letters. Dad's letters. Line after line of regret. Of things he didn't say. Of apologies wrapped in hesitation. I should have protected you better. I didn't expect Denise to turn on you. I thought Glenn would come to his senses. It was grief, mixed with guilt. And I carried both like an inheritance heavier than any house or dollar figure. So I did what Dad never had the chance to do. I confronted Ronald. With Stanley by my side, we walked into his office. Yes, the man still had one. And dropped the third will on his desk. His smile faded. Completely. Where did you find this? He asked. In the place you never belonged, I said. My father's trust. He laughed. Dry. Forced. It won't hold up in court. But we weren't in court. We were in the court of public opinion. And I had already won. But just before we left, Ronald said something that froze me. That's not the last of them, you know. I turned. What? He leaned back smug again. Harold made 4 wills, not 3. I didn't sleep that night. Ronald's words kept echoing in my head. Harold made 4 wills. Not a threat. Not a bluff. He said it like a man holding the last card in a high-stakes game. And suddenly, everything shifted. Because if there was a 4th will, who had it? And more importantly, why keep it hidden? My father had always been a man of patterns. If that 4th document existed, he didn't leave it randomly. He left it for someone. Someone he trusted. Or someone he wanted to test. Stanley and I went back to square one. We pulled every legal record, scanned through every storage unit, revisited old addresses. Nothing. It was Glenn who finally cracked the silence. He showed up at my porch with a cardboard box and a shaky voice. I think I know where it is, he said. Dad gave me this the year before he died. Told me not to open it unless something went wrong. My first instinct? Anger. The kind that crawls up your spine. But I held it in. If this was the 4th will, I needed clarity, not rage. Inside the box were 2 things, a sealed envelope and a small velvet pouch. The envelope was thick, heavy with folded papers. The pouch? A locket. Inside was a photo of me and my dad from when I was 8, at the lake. On the back, he'd written, "For when the world tries to erase you." My breath caught. This wasn't just about inheritance. This was about legacy, memory, and redemption. I opened the envelope, hands trembling. And there it was. The fourth will. It was typewritten, clear, organized, and very different from the others. This version not only reinstated me as sole heir, it itemized every asset, every account, even things I didn't know existed, a hidden investment portfolio, antique holdings, land in Vermont. But what shook me most? A handwritten note stapled to the last page. If this version is ever needed, someone betrayed me. That's when I realized this wasn't just a will. It was a message. My father knew he was being watched, maybe even threatened. Ever found something that made you question every conversation you've ever had with someone you loved? Drop a comment. And if you're still with me, hit that like and subscribe, because things are about to explode. Stanley scanned it, cross-checked every asset, verified the legal references. It was airtight. But that raised a new question. Who else knew about this? Glenn swore he never peeked. I almost believed him. Until I remembered something. At the funeral, Denise had mentioned, "A locket Lorraine doesn't deserve." My stomach flipped. How could she have known? Unless Glenn had shown her. Maybe not all of it, but enough to let her know there was more. And she ran with it. We were in deeper than I thought. This wasn't just about betrayal. It was about orchestration. Calculated deceit. Glenn was no longer just a pawn. He was a wild card. Unstable. Guilty. Maybe even regretful. But still dangerous. And there was more. The land in Vermont? A quick search showed it had been bought under a trust name. C. Mayfield Holdings. No, it couldn't be. Not Ronald again. Unless it wasn't him. Maybe it was someone else in the Mayfield family. Someone we hadn't considered. That night I got a call. Blocked number. Familiar voice. Female. Calm. "You're not supposed to have that will," she said. "Harold promised me I'd get the land." I froze. Who is this? Silence. Then, "I'm Ronald's sister." I didn't even know he had a sister. Her name was Clarice. Apparently she and my father had once been close, back before I was born, and somehow she believed she was entitled to part of his estate. Now that I had the fourth will, she wanted it buried. Literally. Clarice wasn't subtle. She showed up 2 days later at the law office, with a lawyer, and a warning. "You open this will in court, you drag old secrets into the light, things your mother never wanted revealed." That shook me. My mother? She died when I was 16. She and Dad had always been united, or so I thought. Now I wasn't so sure. Was there more to their past, to Dad's choices? Suddenly the fight wasn't about money anymore. It was about truth versus protection. But I had already made my decision. We would take the fourth will to court. And this time, there would be no silence. No more secret meetings, no hush-hush signatures in dark rooms. The truth, my father's full truth, would be revealed, even if it burned everything else down with it. But just as we filed the paperwork, Stanley opened an email and paled. "You need to see this," he said. Attached was a scanned document, dated, signed, titled, "Final Will and Testament, version 5. The fifth will showed up without warning, just a PDF in Stanley's inbox, from an encrypted email with no signature. It was dated 2 weeks before Dad's death. That alone gave me chills. I stared at the screen like it was a ghost. I didn't know what scared me more, that it was real, or that someone had been sitting on it, waiting for the perfect moment to detonate it. And this wasn't just another version. This one changed everything. Again. This will split the inheritance 3 ways, between me, Glenn, and Clarice Mayfield. Not Ronald, not Denise. Clarice, the sister no one in my family had ever spoken of. She wasn't just named. She was framed as a lifelong companion and trusted partner. What? The phrasing felt intentional, almost romantic. Like maybe she wasn't just his business partner. Maybe she was the secret no one ever dared to mention, including my mother. Stanley was stunned. "I've never seen this version, but the formatting, it looks like your father's work. Clean, precise. The language is legal." That terrified me, because if it was real, if it was legitimate, then everything we'd built until now could collapse. The viral video, the press coverage, the emotional testimony, all of it would be seen as premature, misguided, and maybe even dishonest. I felt the weight settle on my chest like a stone. I went back to the letters, Dad's handwriting, the notes in the margin. And one line jumped out at me. If you ever see a version dated March 7th, don't trust it blindly. That was the exact date on the fifth will. My heart started racing. Was it a warning? Was he coerced, drugged, manipulated? The timing matched. It was the week he had a fall. Denise said he was confused. Now I started wondering, who was in the room when he signed it? Ever had a truth in your hands, only to realize it might have been planted? Let me know in the comments. And hey, if you're still here, like and subscribe. We're not done. Not even close. I demanded authentication, a full forensic analysis. We brought in a handwriting expert, a digital metadata analyst, even a retired judge who specialized in late-life estate fraud. The results came back murky. The signature might be his, the document might be real, but the biggest flag? The IP address used to send the email traced back to Glenn. And that's when I lost it. Not because I was surprised, but because I was finally sure. Glenn admitted everything. Over the phone. He said Clarice came to him with a story, how she and Dad had a deep connection, how they were building something bigger than the family understood. Glenn believed her. Or maybe he just saw another way to get a slice of what he'd already lost. Either way, he let her in. Let her plant the fifth will. Let her rewrite the ending of our family history like it was hers to author. And all I could think was, how many versions of my father existed, and which one was real? Clarice went public before I could. A press conference. Polished. Perfectly rehearsed. I was Harold's confidant, she said. We had a bond that went beyond paperwork. She framed me as bitter, spiteful, a daughter unable to accept her father's broader legacy. And the worst part? People listened. She had charm, poise, and a paper trail, however fragile, that backed her up. I watched the coverage in silence, my fingers trembling on the remote. This was no longer just about wills. This was war. Stanley pulled me aside. If you go forward with this, it won't be about justice anymore. It'll be about exposure. Your family, your father, every part of his past, ripped wide open. He was right. If I challenged the fifth will in court, I'd win. Or lose. Everything. Either way, there'd be no quiet resolution. No graceful ending. Just a public reckoning. I stared at the file one more time. Then I closed the folder and said, let's go. But just as we walked into the courthouse, Stanley's phone rang. He answered, nodded slowly, then handed it to me. It's the notary from Vermont, he whispered. I took the call. The voice on the other end? Calm, certain, and deadly serious. That fifth will? It was signed, 2 days after Harold was declared legally incapacitated. The call from the notary shifted everything again. He was calm, professional. Your father had already been declared medically incapacitated when that fifth will was signed, he said. I can testify if needed. That sentence hit me like a thunderclap, because now I had it. The final blow. The proof that the fifth version, the one Clarice weaponized in front of cameras, was a lie. A polished, staged, calculated lie. Just like Ronald. Just like Denise. Only wrapped in prettier packaging. I told Stanley to prepare the motion. Emergency filing. I didn't want this to drag out anymore. We were weeks into this mess, and every day had felt like peeling old wallpaper, revealing rot underneath. But as I looked at the folder again, I couldn't stop thinking about my father. Not as the legal figure. Not as the estate holder. Just as my dad. The man who taught me how to fish. Who cried when I left for college. Who left letters he never sent. What if he meant for parts of Clarice's story to stay hidden? That's the thing no one tells you about justice. It's never clean. It's heavy. Lonely. Sometimes it demands you put your pain above someone else's memory. And that's where I was. I could expose the fraud and destroy Clarice, sure. But in the process, I'd paint Dad as weak, manipulatable. A man who let others shape his legacy. I wasn't sure I wanted to see him that way. I wasn't sure I wanted anyone to see him that way. So I waited. Just one day. I went back to the farmhouse. Sat by the lake where we took that old photo in the locket. I played his voice recording one last time. If you're listening to this, he said, then things didn't go the way I hoped. That line stuck with me. Because deep down, I think he always knew this fight was coming. He just hoped it wouldn't. He left me tools, yes, but also the burden of choice. And some days, that's heavier than any court ruling. Have you ever had to choose between what's right and what feels right? Tell me below. And if this story's holding you, like and subscribe. It means more than you think. The next day, I filed everything. The notary's testimony, The digital metadata, the voice note. I let the truth speak for itself. Clarice never showed up in court. Her lawyer withdrew. And in the end, the judge ruled in my favor. All 5 wills were declared void, except for the 4th one. The one my father left hidden, handwritten, and wrapped in velvet. The courtroom was silent. It felt more like a funeral than a victory. But maybe that's exactly what it was. The burial of a lie. The press didn't run the story. Too complicated. Too many names. No clear villain anymore. Just layers of loss. But that was fine by me. This was never about headlines. It was about breaking a chain of manipulation that had shaped our family for decades. About reclaiming what had been stolen. Not just in assets, but in truth. And as I walked out of that courthouse, the sun hit my face for the first time in weeks. Not metaphorically, literally. It was quiet and warm. Glenn disappeared after that. No letters, no calls. I heard he moved upstate, got a job at a hardware store. People like him don't usually apologize, not directly. But a few months later, I got a package. Inside was the locket, cleaned, polished, and a note. For when you need to remember who he was to you, not to them. It wasn't redemption, but it was something. Maybe even the start of something better. I donated the Vermont land to a veterans fund, sold the antique holdings and gave most of it to a local education project Dad once supported. Not because I'm noble, I'm not, but because I wanted to end this story with more than ashes. I wanted legacy to mean something again. Not control, not revenge, but continuity. Something unbreakable. Even after all the lies, the forged pages, the betrayals, something had to survive, and I thought that was it. I really did. Until Stanley knocked on my door with an envelope marked Confidential Property Title Transfer. It was dated 5 years ago, signed by Harold, witnessed by Clarice, and it wasn't for any of us. It was for someone named Marcus. Marcus. Just one name. No last name. No address. Just a property title, signed by my father, witnessed by Clarice, and dated 5 years before any of the wills were written. I stared at the paper, hoping it would make sense if I just looked long enough. It didn't. Not at first. Stanley was the one who broke the silence. Did your father ever mention anyone by that name? I shook my head. And then, a flash. A memory I hadn't touched in years. A photo. I dug through the farmhouse boxes until I found it. A yellowing Polaroid, stuck between pages of Dad's old Bible. 3 people standing by the lake. Dad, Clarice, and a boy. Maybe 9 years old, shy smile, arms crossed. Marcus was written on the back, in my father's handwriting. I hadn't seen it since I was a teenager. At the time, I just thought he was some neighbor's kid. But now, holding that image, I saw it differently. The way Dad's hand rested on the boy's shoulder. Familiar. Protective. That night, I couldn't sleep. I searched every Marcus born in state that year. Sifted through records, obituaries, school archives, and I found him. Marcus Bell. No mother listed. Father, Harold M. Carson. My father. I dropped the screen like it burned me. Suddenly, everything made sense. The extra account, the land in Vermont, the 5th will with split inheritance. My father had another child. Not just a child, a son. And he'd been hiding him in plain sight. How do you process something like that? I thought I'd been fighting for justice, for the rightful story. But now I realized I hadn't known half of it. Dad hadn't just protected me, he'd protected Marcus too. Hidden him from the chaos, or maybe hidden him from me. And I don't know which hurt more. The fact that I was never told, or the idea that maybe I hadn't been the only one my father loved fiercely. You ever discover a sibling you never knew existed? And realize your whole story was just a piece of someone else's? Let me know below. And hey, if you're still here, like and subscribe. You've earned the next part. Stanley and I drove 2 hours to meet Marcus. He lived on a quiet piece of land, small house, modest truck, dog named Moose. He looked just like Dad. Same eyes, same way of folding his arms when he talked. I told him who I was. He already knew. Clarice had told him years ago. But she said your mom didn't want us connected, he said. My throat tightened. Was that true? Had Mom known? Had she agreed to the silence? Suddenly, even her memory felt distant, filtered. Marcus wasn't angry. That surprised me. He used to visit, quietly, told me I'd understand someday. He said Dad never promised inheritance, only protection. That's why the land was his. He said it was for me to grow something of my own, not take from anyone else. That line hit me harder than all the courtroom drama combined, because it wasn't about legacy. It was about second chances, silent redemption, starting clean, where no one else had ruined it yet. We sat by his fire pit and talked for hours. About Dad, about Clarice, about the pain of being the secret. I told him everything. The forged wills, the lawsuits, the media storm. He didn't flinch. "You've been carrying the weight for all of us," he said. And then he stood, walked to his truck, and came back with a small box. Inside, letters. From Dad. Dozens. To Marcus. Every birthday, every Christmas, every milestone. Signed, "From the father you can't tell anyone about yet." I cried. Not because I was angry, but because I realized how lonely my father must have been. Split between families, guilt, silence, trying to do right by everyone, but ending up wounding both sides. I didn't forgive him, not fully, but I understood him. And sometimes, that's the only kind of peace we get. Before we left, Marcus gave me one of the letters. "He wrote this the day after you turned 30, he said. "Thought you should read it." I opened it in the car. Just one line. "Tell Lorraine she got the best parts of me, the parts I didn't know how to keep whole." I drove home with the letter in my lap, didn't even listen to the radio. Just the sound of tires on old country roads, and my father's words looping in my mind. "You got the best parts of me." I didn't know what that meant when I was younger. But now, after courtrooms, forged wills, lost siblings, fake lawyers, and secrets wrapped in velvet, I think I finally do. He didn't leave me money. Or houses. He left me something else. The weight of truth. People always talk about closure like it's a destination. But it's not. It's more like a hallway. Quiet, cold, with too many doors. Some you open, some you don't. And some, like the ones marked Marcus, Clarice, and Mom knew, you just pass by slowly, peeking inside but never stepping in. I'll never have full answers. But maybe that's not the point anymore. Stanley asked if I wanted to update the press. "You could clear your name, set the record straight." But I said no. I didn't need strangers to validate the truth anymore. The people who needed to know, knew. Marcus knew. Glenn knew. Even Denise, wherever she is now, probably sipping wine in someone else's living room. She knew she lost. And honestly, that was enough. I kept the farmhouse. The lake. The desk with the hidden folder. People offered to buy it. Said it was vintage. Charming. Perfect for an Airbnb. I laughed. That house isn't charming. It's haunted. Not by ghosts, but by choices. My father's, mine. But still, I kept it. Because it's the only place where the full truth ever existed, even in fragments. That house remembers. And sometimes that's all we need. One place that remembers. Have you ever chosen silence not out of fear, but because you knew no one else would understand the noise? Drop your thoughts below. And if you've made it this far, you're part of this story too. Hit that like. Subscribe. You've earned it. I visit Marcus once a month. He sends me vegetables from his garden. I bring him old photos. We don't call each other siblings, but we don't need to. We share too much now. Grief, guilt, history. I think Dad would have liked that. Two halves of a puzzle he never finished, finally sitting at the same table, sharing stories over coffee and burnt toast. As for Glenn, we haven't spoken again. And that's okay. Some ties don't need to be cut or mended. They just need to fade. Quietly. Like smoke after a storm. I heard he's doing okay, works hard, keeps his head down. And maybe that's his way of making peace. We all grieve differently. Some with action, some with distance. Some by rebuilding gardens on land they were never supposed to inherit. I left one of Dad's letters on the church pew last Sunday. No name, no signature. Just the sentence. If you're reading this, then you're not the only one who carries questions. I don't know who picked it up. Maybe no one did. But maybe it found the right hands. That's how healing works sometimes. Not through answers, but through echoes. And then, just this morning, a package arrived. No return address. Inside, a single photograph. My father, holding a baby. Not me. Not Marcus, someone else. On the back, one line. Blood is only the beginning.
Hi, you are on the Moving Narratives channel. Subscribe and follow our stories.